Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The fluorescent lights of St. Decatape. Joseph's hospital buzzed like angry wasps as Sarah Wilson held her mother's fragile hand, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest grow weaker with each breath. At 23, Sarah had already lived more heartbreak than most people twice her age. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. Watching the woman who had been her entire world slip away, one labored breath at a time. "Mama, please don't leave me," she whispered, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her exhausted face. She'd been here for 18 hours straight, having rushed from her night shift at Thompson's Diner when the call came. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, those beautiful brown eyes that had always looked at Sarah with such love and pride, even when they had nothing but each other. "My sweet baby girl," her mother managed, her voice barely audible above the beeping machines. "You've been so strong, so good to me." Each word was a struggle, but her mother's grip on Sarah's hand tightened with surprising strength. "Promise me. Promise you'll live for love, not just survival. You deserve everything beautiful in this world. Don't talk like that, Mama. You're going to get better." The doctor said, "Shay." Her mother's thumb brushed away Sarah's tears. "I fought long enough, baby. It's time. Let me go with peace, knowing you'll find happiness." Sarah wanted to protest, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but she could see the pain etched in every line of her mother's face. For 2 years, they'd battled the cancer together, through chemotherapy sessions that left her mother violently sick, through the mounting medical bills that forced Sarah to work 3 jobs just to keep the treatments coming, through the sleepless nights when hope felt as distant as the stars. "I love you so much, Mama." Sarah sobbed, bringing her mother's hand to her cheek. "You're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. And you are my greatest achievement," her mother whispered, her breathing becoming more shallow. "My beautiful, intelligent, loving daughter, the world needs your light. Don't let anyone dim it." At 3:47 a.m., with Sarah singing her mother's favorite hymn through her tears, Margaret Wilson took her final breath. The machines went silent, except for that terrible continuous beep that meant everything had ended. Sarah's world collapsed in that sterile hospital room, her sobs echoing off the walls as she cradled her mother's still form. But grief, Sarah would learn, was a luxury she couldn't afford. 2 hours later, as dawn painted the sky in soft pastels that her mother would never see again, a stern-faced hospital administrator appeared in the doorway with a clipboard and an expression that spoke of countless similar conversations. "Miss Wilson, I'm sorry for your loss, but we need to discuss the outstanding balance on your mother's account." Sarah looked up from her mother's bedside, her eyes red and swollen. "Can't this wait? She's gone. I understand this is difficult, but hospital policy requires immediate payment or payment arrangements for the deceased. Your mother's account shows an outstanding balance of $47,000, plus the additional charges from the last 2 days will bring it to approximately $50,000. The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. Woo, sure, Ling. She made barely $20,000 a year working her 3 jobs combined. 2. Don't have that kind of money. Surely there's some kind of payment plan. Or there's also the matter of burial arrangements. If payment isn't received within 48 hours, the body will need to be transferred to the county for." The woman's voice softened slightly. "For indigent burial. Indigent burial. A pauper's grave." Her mother, who had worked 2 jobs her entire life to give Sarah every opportunity, who had sacrificed everything for her daughter's future, "I would be buried in an unmarked grave with strangers if Sarah couldn't find $50,000 in 2 days. "Please," Sarah begged, her voice breaking. "There has to be something. My mother was a good woman. She deserves better than I'm sorry, Miss Wilson. Hospital policy is clear. You have 48 hours." Alone in that sterile room with her mother's body, Sarah felt something inside her break. She had tried so hard to do everything right, working multiple jobs, going to night school when she could afford it, dreaming of becoming a teacher so she could make a difference in other children's lives. But none of it mattered now. She was going to fail her mother in the worst possible way. The next evening, desperation had driven Sarah to a place she never imagined she'd be. The mansion in the hills stood like something from a movie. All marble columns and golden light spilling from massive windows. Cars that cost more than most people made in a year lined the circular driveway. And women in evening gowns glittered like jewels as they entered the palatial front doors. "You sure about this, honey?" asked Lisa, her coworker from the diner, who had reluctantly told her about this place. "These ain't regular men. They're rich, powerful, and they expect to get what they pay for." Sarah's hands shook as she smoothed down the simple black dress Lisa had lent her, the only remotely elegant thing either of them owned. "I don't have a choice, Lisa. It's this, or watch them put my mama in the ground like she was nobody." Inside, the opulence was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on marble floors, and the scent of expensive cologne and perfume mingled with champagne and exotic flowers. Men in $1,000 suits moved through the crowd with predatory confidence, their eyes assessing the young women who waited nervously in a separate room. Sarah felt sick as the reality of what she was about to do hit her fully. But then she thought of her mother's voice. "Promise you'll live for love, not just survival." And she knew that sometimes survival had to come first before love could even be possible. Michael Carter stood near the bar, nursing his third whiskey and wondering why the hell he'd let David talk him into coming to this place. At 32, Michael possessed everything that should have fulfilled him: inherited billions, a global business empire, access to society's most coveted women. Yet none of it felt real anymore. His latest relationship had ended when he'd overheard his fiancée Emily on the phone, laughing with her friend about how she was securing her financial future by marrying him. "Come on, Michael," David had urged. "You need to blow off some steam. These girls are all willing, all clean, all desperate enough to make it worth your while. No emotional complications, no gold-digging schemes, just pure honest transaction." But as Michael watched the auction begin, young women paraded like livestock while wealthy men bid obscene amounts, he felt disgusted with himself and his entire world. He was about to leave when she walked onto the small stage. She was different from the others, where they had tried to project sexuality and confidence. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke of inner strength despite obvious vulnerability. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the soft lights, and her natural beauty needed no enhancement beyond the simple black dress that hugged her curves modestly. But it was her eyes that stopped Michael cold, deep, expressive brown eyes that held pain and desperation. Yes, but also an unbroken spirit that called to something deep in his chest. As the bidding began, Michael found himself studying her face. She wasn't performing like the others, wasn't trying to entice the crowd. She stood straight and proud, despite the circumstances, and when her eyes briefly met his across the room, he saw something that took his breath away. Courage in the face of impossible circumstances. "Wusher. Ling." The words were out of Michael's mouth before he realized he'd spoken. The room went silent, all eyes turning to him in shock. Even for this crowd, $50,000 was an astronomical bid. $50,000 going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Carter. In the opulent suite upstairs, Sarah stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her arms wrapped around herself as she tried to stop shaking. The man who had bid on her, Michael Carter, she'd heard someone whisper, sat on the edge of the massive bed, still fully clothed, making no move toward her. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The gentleness in his voice surprised her. She'd expected demands, aggression, entitlement. Instead, his tone held something that sounded almost like respect. "Sarah," she whispered without turning around. "Sarah Wilson. I'm Michael. Michael Carter." He paused, and she could hear him moving, but he didn't approach her. "Sarah, why are you here?" The question broke something loose inside her, and suddenly she was telling him everything, about her mother's death just hours ago, about the hospital's ultimatum, about the impossible choice between her dignity and her mother's final rest. The words poured out of her like a dam bursting, and by the end, she was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. When gentle hands touched her shoulders, she didn't pull away. Michael turned her around slowly, his blue eyes filled with something she hadn't expected. Genuine compassion. "I'm so sorry," he said simply. "Losing your mother? There's no pain like it." Something in his voice told her he spoke from experience. Without thinking, She looked up into his face and saw past the wealth and power to the man beneath, someone who understood loss, who recognized the kind of grief that hollowed you out from the inside. "She was everything to me," Sarah whispered. "And now I can't even give her a proper funeral." Michael's hands framed her face gently, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Yes, you can. I'll make sure of it. I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering." His voice was firm but kind. No one should have to sell themselves to bury their mother. For the next hour, Michael simply held her while she grieved, his strong arms providing a shelter she desperately needed. There was nothing sexual about it, just one human being comforting another in their darkest moment. As Sarah finally fell into an exhausted sleep against his chest, Michael found himself wondering when he'd last felt this protective of another person, this connected to someone's pain and hope. When dawn crept through the windows, Sarah stirred to find herself covered with a soft blanket. Michael sitting in a nearby chair, fully clothed, watching over her like a guardian angel. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. She felt the first tentative flutter of hope and something else she was afraid to name, something warm and electric that sparked between them every time their eyes met. Neither of them realized it yet, but in that room, in that moment of shared vulnerability and unexpected tenderness, something extraordinary had begun. Chapter 2. Unexpected Salvation. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through silk curtains and the scent of coffee and warm pastries. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the nightmare of the past few days. Then reality crashed back. Her mother was gone. She was in a stranger's bedroom, and she had spent the night in the arms of a man who had paid $50,000 for her company. Shame burned through her as she sat up quickly, her heart racing. Michael was nowhere to be seen, but she could hear movement from what sounded like a kitchen beyond the suite's sitting area. She needed to leave, needed to get out before he woke up, and expected whatever men like him expected after paying such an astronomical sum. Her hands shook as she smoothed down her wrinkled dress and searched for her shoes. Woosher, Ling. The number kept echoing in her mind. She could pay for her mother's funeral, but at what cost to her soul? Her mother had always taught her that their poverty didn't make them poor in spirit, that dignity was something no one could take from you unless you gave it away. Had she given it away last night? Planning to sneak out without saying goodbye, Sarah spun around to find Michael standing in the doorway, holding a silver tray laden with coffee, fresh fruit, and pastries that probably cost more than she made in a week. He had changed from his evening clothes into dark jeans and a simple white shirt that somehow made him look more approachable, more real. Yes, she admitted, unable to lie to those perceptive blue eyes. "I thought it would be easier," Michael said, setting the tray on the elegant dining table and studying her face. "Easier for who? For both of us. You got what you paid for, and I got what I needed. Clean transaction, like your friend said." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but she forced them out anyway. Michael's expression darkened. "Is that what you think happened here last night? Wasn't it?" Sarah challenged, though her voice wavered. "You paid, padesat, nulla. I spent the night in your bed. That's how these things work, isn't it? Come here," Michael said softly, but with an authority that made her feet move before her mind could protest. When she stood before him, he gently took her hands in his. "Look at me, Sarah." She met his eyes reluctantly, surprised by the intensity she found there. "I held you while you grieved your mother. I listened while you told me about a woman who raised a daughter with such strength and dignity that she'd sacrifice anything to honor her memory. Nothing more happened, and nothing more was expected." His thumbs traced over her knuckles. "What happened between us last night wasn't a transaction. It was one human being helping another through the darkest moment of their life." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "Then why did you bid on me? Why pay so much if you didn't want Michael?" Was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because when I looked at you up there, I saw something I haven't seen in my world for a very long time. Someone real, someone good, forced into an impossible situation." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "And because I couldn't bear the thought of someone else treating you like property." The sincerity in his voice undid her completely. Sarah found herself crying again, but these tears felt different, not the desperate sobs of grief and shame, but something softer, warmer relief, maybe, or gratitude for a kindness she hadn't dared hope for. "Hey," Michael said gently, pulling her into his arms again. "It's okay. You're okay." Being held by him felt dangerously right, like coming home to a place she'd never been but somehow recognized. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her cheek, smelled the subtle cologne that mixed with something uniquely him. When she finally pulled back to look at him, the air between them seemed to shimmer with an electricity that had nothing to do with grief or gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for last night, for this morning, for treating me like a person worthy of respect." Michael's hand came up to cup her cheek. "That shouldn't be something to thank someone for, Sarah. That should be a given." The way he said her name sent warmth spiraling through her chest. She found herself leaning into his touch, her body responding to his nearness in ways that surprised her. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel this flutter of attraction, this pull toward a man whose world was so far from hers. They might as well be different species. "Have breakfast with me," Michael said, his voice softer now, more intimate. "Please. We can talk about your mother's funeral arrangements." He hesitated. "And maybe about what comes next for you." Over breakfast on his private terrace overlooking the city, Sarah found herself opening up to Michael in ways she'd never expected. Maybe it was the way he listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but actually hearing her. Or maybe it was how he asked questions that showed he cared about the answers, that he saw her as more than just a pretty face or a charity case. "You wanted to be a teacher," he said, refilling her coffee cup with practiced ease. "What stopped you?" Sarah smiled sadly. "Life. Mama's diagnosis came right before I was supposed to start student teaching. The medical bills meant I had to drop out and work full-time." She looked out at the sprawling city below. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had the luxury of following my dreams instead of just surviving. What if you still could?" She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. "I mean, what if I told you that you don't have to choose between honoring your mother and building your future? What if you could do both?" "Michael," Sarah shook her head, "I can't take charity. I won't be anyone's kept woman or pet project. That's not what I'm offering." His voice carried a conviction that made her listen. "I'm offering you a job. A real job with real responsibilities and a real salary." "Doing what?" "I'm a waitress with 2 years of college. Being my personal assistant, managing my schedule, handling correspondence, helping with research for business decisions." Michael's eyes never left hers. "You're intelligent, Sarah. Anyone who can work 3 jobs while caring for a dying mother and still maintain hope for the future has skills that most business schools can't teach." The offer was tempting, dangerously so. But Sarah had learned to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "Why, really? Why would you do this?" Michael was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. "Because I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want something from money, connections, status. You're the first person I've met in years who seems genuinely good, who cares about something beyond yourself." He met her eyes. "And maybe because I'm selfish enough to want to keep someone real in my life." There was something in his voice, a vulnerability that matched her own, that made her believe him. Against her better judgment, against every protective instinct she'd developed, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she said softly, "but I want to earn every penny. No special treatment, no pity raises. If I'm not good at the job, fire me." Michael's expression transformed with pure joy. "Deal. But I have one condition." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Let me take care of your mother's funeral arrangements, all of them, as an advance on your salary if that makes you feel better. But let me handle it." His voice gentled. "Your mother deserves to be honored properly, and you deserve to grieve without worrying about money." The kindness in his offer made her chest tight. "Michael, I don't know how to thank you for, don't thank me yet," he said with a grin that made her stomach flutter. "Wait until you see what working for me is actually like. I'm a demanding perfectionist, and I work insane hours." "Sounds like my kind of challenge," Sarah replied, surprised by her own playful tone. Their eyes met across the table, and something sparked between them, something that felt like the beginning of something much more complicated and wonderful than either of them was ready to acknowledge. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in the back of Michael's sleek black car, heading toward Carter Global Enterprises. She'd gone home first to change into her one professional outfit, a simple navy dress she'd bought for job interviews. And Michael had insisted on picking her up personally. "You didn't have to do this," she said, as they pulled up to the gleaming skyscraper that housed his company. "I could have taken the bus." "I know you could have," Michael replied, coming around to open her door, "but I wanted to." The simple statement, spoken with such certainty, sent warmth flooding through her. When he offered his arm to escort her into the building, she took it without hesitation, trying to ignore how right it felt to walk beside him. The Carter Global building was even more impressive inside than out, all marble and glass, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted wealth. Employees hurried past with respectful nods to Michael, their eyes curious as they took in Sarah beside him. Mr. Carter, his current assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, appeared at his elbow as they stepped off the elevator. "Your 10 a.m. is waiting, and you have 7 messages that need immediate attention." "Thank you, Helen. This is Sarah Wilson, who will be taking over as my personal assistant starting Monday. Would you mind showing her around, explaining our systems?" Helen's smile was polite but assessing. "Of course, sir. Miss Wilson, if you'll follow me." As Sarah followed Helen through the maze of offices and conference rooms, she caught glimpses of Michael through glass walls, commanding meetings with the kind of natural authority that came from years of leadership. Watching him in his element, she felt a flutter of nervousness. Could she really do this? Could she fit into his world? "He's not like the others," Helen said quietly as they stood outside Michael's corner office, watching him through the glass as he listened intently to a presentation. "Excuse me?" "Mr. Carter. He's not like the other wealthy men I've worked for. He actually listens, actually cares about doing the right thing." Helen's expression softened. "But he's also lonely, though he'd never admit it. All that money and power, but no one who sees the man beneath it." Sarah's heart clenched at the older woman's words. She thought of how Michael had held her last night, how gentle he'd been at breakfast, how he'd looked at her like she mattered. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. Helen smiled. "Because in 20 years of working for him, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you when you walked in here. And frankly, it's about time." Before Sarah could respond, Michael's office door opened, and he emerged, his face lighting up when he saw her. "How was the tour?" he asked, moving to stand closer to her than strictly professional distance required. "Intimidating," Sarah admitted honestly, "but exciting." "Good. The best challenges usually are." His smile was warm, intimate, despite Helen's presence. "Are you free for dinner tonight? I thought we could discuss your responsibilities in more detail." The invitation sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the man asking, "I'd like that." As Michael walked her to the elevator, his hand warm on the small of her back, Sarah caught sight of a blonde woman stepping out of another elevator. The woman's eyes locked on Michael with possessive familiarity, then shifted to Sarah with barely concealed hostility. "Michael, darling," the woman called out, her voice carrying a note of ownership that made Sarah's stomach clench. "I've been trying to reach you." Michael stiffened beside her. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Emily's smile was sharp as glass as she approached them, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. "We need to talk privately." Sarah felt the temperature in the hallway drop several degrees as Emily's gaze ran over her dismissively. This, she realized, was what the real obstacles to whatever was growing between her and Michael would look like. Beautiful, wealthy, and entitled women who belonged in his world in ways she never could. But when Michael stepped subtly closer to her, his presence protective and reassuring, Sarah felt that flutter of hope again. Maybe, just maybe, belonging wasn't about money or status. Maybe it was about something deeper, something that couldn't be bought or inherited, something that felt an awful lot like the beginning of love. Chapter 3. Walls Come Down. 3 weeks into her new position, Sarah had found her rhythm at Carter Global Enterprises. What had initially felt overwhelming now energized her, managing Michael's complex schedule, researching potential investments, and coordinating with department heads who had initially viewed her with suspicion but now sought her input on projects. Her quick mind and natural intuition for people had proven invaluable, and she was beginning to understand why Michael had taken such a risk on her. More importantly, she was beginning to understand Michael himself. "The Peterson Group meeting is at 2, she said, entering his office with his afternoon coffee, black, no sugar, exactly the way he liked it. "But I've moved your 4 o'clock with the marketing team to tomorrow morning. The reports you requested won't be ready until 5, and I thought you'd want to review them properly before making any decisions." Michael looked up from the contract spread across his mahogany desk, a slow smile spreading across his face. "How did you know I'd want to see those reports first?" "Because you always want all the information before committing to anything," Sarah replied, setting his coffee down and trying to ignore the way his eyes followed her movements. "And because the marketing team has been working on this campaign for months, giving them an extra day might mean the difference between a good presentation and a great one. And you care about their presentation being great because you care about it being great." The words slipped out before she could stop them, more honest than she'd intended. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, the professional atmosphere crackled with something much more personal. Michael stood slowly, moving around the desk until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "Is that the only reason you care, Sarah?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Over the past 3 weeks, moments like this had become more frequent. Stolen glances across meeting rooms, conversations that lasted longer than necessary. His hand lingering on hers when he passed her documents. The attraction between them was becoming impossible to ignore, but neither had been brave enough to acknowledge it directly. "Mr. Carter," she began formally, but her voice came out breathier than intended. "Michael," he corrected softly, his hand coming up to touch her cheek. "My name is Michael, and when it's just us, I want you to use it." "Michael," she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips seemed to break something loose in both of them. The intercom buzzed sharply, making them both jump apart. Helen's voice filled the office. "Mr. Carter, your mother is here to see you." Michael's expression immediately shuddered, the intimate moment evaporating like morning mist. "Send her in, Helen." Sarah started to leave, but Michael caught her wrist gently. "Stay, please. I have a feeling I'm going to need moral support." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the office door opened, and a woman swept in like a queen granting an audience. Elizabeth Carter was elegantly beautiful in the way that only old money could achieve. Perfectly coiffed silver hair, a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly salary, and an expression of polite disdain that seemed permanently etched into her aristocratic features. "Michael, darling," she said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of boarding schools and country clubs. Her eyes swept dismissively over Sarah. "I see you're busy." "Mother." Michael's voice was carefully neutral. "This is Sarah Wilson, my personal assistant." "Sarah, my mother, Elizabeth Carter." Elizabeth's smile was razor-sharp. "How interesting. I wasn't aware you'd replaced Helen." "I didn't replace Helen. Sarah works directly with me on special projects." Michael's hand moved to rest protectively on Sarah's lower back, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by his mother. "I see." Elizabeth's gaze turned calculating as she studied Sarah more carefully. "Well, Miss Wilson, perhaps you could give us some privacy. Family matters, you understand." The dismissal was clear, but before Sarah could respond, Michael's voice cut through the tension. "Actually, Sarah should stay. We were in the middle of reviewing important contracts." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could feel the power struggle between mother and son, could see the way Elizabeth's perfectly composed mask slipped just enough to reveal her shock at being contradicted. "Very well," Elizabeth said finally, her tone glacial. "Michael, I came to discuss the Harrison Charity Gala next week. Emily Thompson has agreed to be your escort, and I haven't agreed to escort Emily anywhere," Michael interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't be difficult, darling. You know how important maintaining proper social connections is for the business. Emily is perfect for you. Beautiful, well-bred, from an excellent family." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. Emily Thompson, the blonde woman from the elevator who had looked at Michael with such ownership, the woman who clearly belonged in his world in ways Sarah never could. "I'm perfectly capable of choosing my own companions, Mother." Elizabeth's laugh was like breaking crystal. "Companions, yes, but a man in your position must think about more than companionship. Image matters, Michael. Legacy matters. You can't seriously be considering throwing away everything our family has built for. Her eyes flicked dismissively towards Sarah. For whatever this is, the words hit Sarah like physical blows. She started to step away, to remove herself from a conversation that was making her feel smaller with every word. But Michael's hand on her back pressed more firmly, keeping her beside him. "What this is," Michael said, his voice dangerously quiet, "is none of your business." "Everything you do is my business," Elizabeth snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Do you think I don't know about your recent charitable activities? Paying for some woman's funeral, hiring her with no qualifications. People are talking, Michael. They're saying you've lost your mind over some little waitress who enough—" Michael's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Get out." Elizabeth's eyes widened in shock. "Excuse me? You heard me. Get out of my office now." For a moment, Sarah thought Elizabeth might explode. Instead, she drew herself up to her full height, every inch the imperious matriarch. "You're making a mistake, Michael. Don't let infatuation destroy everything you've worked for." Her gaze turned to Sarah, cold as winter. "And you, Miss Wilson, should ask yourself whether you're helping him or destroying him." After Elizabeth swept out, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and barely contained fury in her wake, the office fell silent. Sarah felt sick, Elizabeth's words echoing in her mind. Was she destroying Michael? Was her presence in his life causing more harm than good? "Sarah." Michael's voice was gentle, concerned. "Look at me." She couldn't. Shame and doubt churned in her stomach, making her feel small and out of place in this beautiful office, with its expensive furniture and commanding view of the city. "Hey." Michael's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Don't let her get to you. She doesn't know what she's talking about, doesn't she?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Michael, maybe she's right. Maybe I am destroying." "Stop." His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You're not destroying anything. If anything, you're the first real thing that's happened to me in years. But your family, your business, will adapt, or they won't. Either way, it's my choice to make." His eyes were fierce, determined. "Do you trust me, Sarah?" She searched his face, seeing past the wealth and power to the man who had held her while she grieved, who had given her hope when she had none left. "Yes." "Then trust me when I say that you belong here, not because I'm paying you, but because I want you here. Because I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "Because I care about you more than I should, probably. But I can't seem to help myself." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Sarah felt her heart racing, felt the walls she'd built around herself beginning to crumble. That evening, the annual Carter Global Charity Gala was in full swing in the hotel ballroom Michael had rented for the occasion. Sarah hadn't planned to attend, she had work to catch up on, and besides, she didn't have anything appropriate to wear to such an elegant event. But Michael had insisted, and Helen had mysteriously produced a stunning midnight blue gown that fit her perfectly. "You look beautiful," Michael murmured, as he met her at the entrance, resplendent in his black tuxedo. The way his eyes traveled over her made her feel like the most gorgeous woman in the room. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, allowing him to escort her into the glittering ballroom. The event was everything she'd expected: crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, women dripping in diamonds, and men discussing million-dollar deals over aged whiskey. But with Michael's arm through hers, his attention focused entirely on her. Sarah found herself enjoying the evening more than she'd anticipated. They were talking with a group of business associates when Emily Thompson appeared, stunning in a red gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Michael," Emily's voice carried across the conversation, demanding attention. "I've been looking everywhere for you." She moved to Michael's side with practiced ease, her hand settling possessively on his arm as she smiled at the group with queenly confidence. Her eyes barely acknowledged Sarah's presence. "Emily," Michael said politely, but Sarah noticed he didn't move away from her side to accommodate Emily's advance. "You simply must come meet the Bradfords," Emily continued, tugging at his arm. "They're considering a major investment, and James specifically asked to speak with you." "I'm sure they can wait," Michael replied calmly. "I'm enjoying my current conversation." Emily's smile faltered slightly, her eyes flicking between Michael and Sarah with growing suspicion. Of course, but business is business, darling. I'm sure your assistant understands. The emphasis on assistant was subtle but unmistakable, designed to put Sarah in her place. Around them, the conversation had quieted, people sensing the undercurrent of tension. Actually, Michael said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly attentive crowd, I'd like everyone to meet someone very special. This is Sarah Wilson, and she's much more than my assistant. She's... He paused, his eyes meeting Sarah's with an intensity that made her breath catch. She's the woman who's changed my life. The declaration sent ripples through the gathered crowd. Sarah felt her cheeks burning, but Michael's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Emily's composure cracked visibly. Michael, surely you're not serious. She's very pretty, but what, Emily? Michael's voice had gone dangerously quiet. But she's not good enough for this crowd? But she doesn't have the right pedigree? That's not what I meant, Emily backpedaled. But her face had gone pale. Actually, I think it's exactly what you meant. Michael's arm slipped around Sarah's waist, pulling her closer. And I think it's time people in our social circle learned some manners. Before anyone could respond, the orchestra began playing a slow waltz. Michael turned to Sarah with a smile that was both tender and defiant. Dance with me. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. As Michael led her onto the dance floor, she was aware of every eye in the room following them, but she didn't care. In Michael's arms, moving to the gentle rhythm of the music, nothing else mattered. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. For defending me. For making me feel like I belong here. Michael pulled back to look at her, his eyes dark with emotion. You do belong here, Sarah. You belong wherever you want to be. As the music swelled around them, Michael leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't their first kiss that had been a gentle, hesitant thing 2 weeks ago after a late night of working together, but this kiss was different. This kiss was a declaration, a claiming, a promise all rolled into one. His lips were warm and demanding, and when she responded with equal passion, she heard him groan softly against her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah realized the entire ballroom had gone silent. Everyone was staring at them, some with shock, some with disapproval, and a few with what looked like genuine pleasure at the unexpected romance. Michael's smile was brilliant as he looked down at her. Let them stare, he murmured. Let them all know that Michael Carter has found something worth more than all their approval combined. As they continued dancing, lost in each other's eyes, neither noticed Emily Thompson's face twisted with fury, or the way she pulled out her phone to make a very important call. The battle lines were being drawn. But for now, in this moment, Michael and Sarah had each other, and that felt like everything. Chapter 4. Growing Closer. The morning after the charity gala, Sarah arrived at the office to find flowers on her desk, not the expected roses or lilies that wealthy men typically sent, but a simple bouquet of sunflowers with a note in Michael's distinctive handwriting. Thank you for the most honest moment I've had in years. Her heart fluttered as she touched the bright petals. Sunflowers had been her mother's favorite, something she'd mentioned to Michael weeks ago during one of their late-night conversations. That he'd remembered, that he'd chosen something meaningful over impressive, made her chest tight with emotion. Someone's got it bad, Helen observed with a knowing smile as she entered with Michael's morning schedule. It's not like that, Sarah protested automatically, though her blush betrayed her. Honey, I've worked for that man for 5 years. I've seen him with socialites, supermodels, and heiresses, and he's never looked at any of them the way he looks at you. Helen's expression softened. Just be careful. His world can be cruel to people like us. Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Michael appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up when he saw her. Good morning, he said, his voice carrying an intimacy that made Helen discreetly excuse herself. Good morning, Sarah replied, suddenly shy. Thank you for the flowers. How did you remember that my mother loved sunflowers? I remember everything you tell me. Michael moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. About your mother, your dreams, the way you take your coffee, how you bite your lip when you're concentrating. His thumb brushed over her lower lip, as if to demonstrate. I remember all of it. The simple touch sent fire racing through her veins. The air between them crackled with the tension that had been building for weeks, and Sarah found herself leaning into his touch without conscious thought. "Michael," she whispered, his name a plea and a prayer all at once. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said softly. "Not a business dinner, a real date, just you and me." Her practical mind screamed warnings about mixing business with pleasure, about the dangerous territory they were entering, but her heart, her treacherous, hopeful heart, was already saying yes. "Where?" she heard herself ask. Michael's smile was devastating. "Somewhere special. Somewhere we can just be ourselves." That evening, instead of taking her to another expensive restaurant filled with people from his social circle, Michael drove them to a small jazz club in Sarah's old neighborhood. The jazz club pulsed with intimate energy, exposed brick walls lined with vintage posters, amber lighting that cast everything in golden warmth, and music that seemed to flow through the very air like liquid emotion. The scent of bourbon and jasmine perfume mingled with the smoky notes of the saxophone, creating an atmosphere both sophisticated and welcoming. "How did you find this place?" Sarah asked, as they settled into a corner booth, the worn leather seats bringing them close together in the intimate space. "I may have done some research into your favorite spots," Michael admitted, his eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure. "I wanted to see the world through your eyes." The gesture was so thoughtful, so unlike the impersonal grandeur she'd expected, that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Michael, tell me about this place," he said, signaling the waitress for drinks. "What makes it special to you?" For the next hour, Sarah found herself sharing memories she'd rarely spoken aloud. How her mother had brought her here on her 18th birthday, how they danced to the live band while other couples looked on with indulgent smiles, how her mother had whispered that someday Sarah would bring someone special here, someone who understood that the best things in life weren't necessarily the most expensive. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman," Michael said softly, his hand covering hers on the small table. "She was—" Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "She would have liked you, I think, not because of your money or status, but because of how you make me feel safe and valued." Michael's eyes darkened at her words. "How do I make you feel, Sarah?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Sarah felt her pulse racing as she looked into his eyes, seeing desire and something deeper reflected there. "Like I matter," she whispered. "Like I'm not just surviving anymore, but actually living." Michael's grip on her hand tightened. "You do matter, more than you know." When the band began playing a slow, sultry number, Michael stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." This time, there was no audience of socialites judging their every move, no cameras or gossip columnists documenting their interaction. There was just the music, the dim lighting, and the feeling of Michael's strong arms around her as they swayed together on the small dance floor. "This is nice," Sarah sighed, her head resting against his shoulder. She could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him, could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Better than the charity gala?" Michael asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Much better. This feels real." Michael pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face in the gesture that was becoming achingly familiar. "It is real, Sarah. What's happening between us? It's the most real thing I've ever felt." When he kissed her this time, it was slow and deep and full of promise. Sarah melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as desire pooled low in her belly. She could taste wine on his lips, could feel the barely restrained passion in the way his hands trembled slightly against her skin. "Take me home," she whispered against his mouth, surprising herself with her boldness. Michael's eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Sarah rose on her tiptoes and kissed him again, pouring all her certainty and want into the connection. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Michael's smile was filled with heat and tenderness in equal measure. Michael's penthouse apartment was everything Sarah had expected. Spacious, elegantly furnished, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city lights. But what she hadn't expected was how he made her feel completely at ease the moment they walked through the door. "Wine," he offered, but his eyes never left her face. "Later," she said softly, stepping closer to him. "Right now, I just want this. I want you." Michael groaned softly, his control visibly fraying. "Sarah, if we do this, there's no going back. My world, my family, they're going to make things difficult for you, for us." "I don't care about them," she said, her hands moving to the buttons of his shirt. "I only care about you, about this." With infinite tenderness, Michael swept her into his arms and carried her to his bedroom. What followed was everything Sarah had dreamed and more: slow, passionate lovemaking that spoke of reverence and desire in equal measure. Michael's hands mapped every curve of her body as if memorizing something precious, while his lips whispered endearments against her skin that made her feel both cherished and desired. When they finally moved together in perfect rhythm, their connection transcended the physical. It was emotional, spiritual, a claiming that went so deep. In the aftermath, as they lay entwined in the tangle of expensive sheets, Sarah felt completely and utterly transformed. "Stay," Michael murmured against her hair as she started to rise. "Stay the night." "I shouldn't," Sarah protested weakly. "If people find out, let them find out." Michael's arms tightened around her. "I'm tired of hiding how I feel about you." The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both thrilling and terrifying. During the day, they maintained professional boundaries at the office, though the heated glances and subtle touches spoke of their nighttime intimacies. In the evenings, Michael showed Sarah his world. Private gallery openings where million-dollar paintings hung like casual decor, intimate concerts in venues she'd only dreamed of seeing, quiet dinners at restaurants where the chef personally came to their table. But Sarah showed him her world, too. She took him to her mother's favorite church, where the congregation welcomed him with warmth that had nothing to do with his bank account. She brought him to community barbecues where children played in the street and neighbors looked out for each other, where genuine laughter and conversation mattered more than networking and business deals. "I've never experienced anything like this," Michael confessed one evening as they sat on Sarah's small apartment balcony, sharing takeout Chinese food and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "This sense of community, of belonging somewhere just because you're a good person, not because of what you can offer. It's what I grew up with," Sarah said, curling into his side on the worn but comfortable outdoor chair. "Mama always said that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love you and stand by you no matter what." Michael pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I want that. I want to belong somewhere like this." "You do belong," Sarah assured him. "Mrs. Lopez from downstairs already considers you part of the family. She keeps asking when you're going to marry me and give her grandbabies to spoil." Michael's laugh rumbled through his chest. "And what do you tell her?" Sarah's cheeks heated. "That it's complicated." "Is it?" Michael's voice was soft, serious. "Complicated?" Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the caller ID of his business line, which was strange since he was sitting right beside her. "Mr. Carter's office," she answered automatically. "Miss Wilson." The voice on the other end was cold, professional, carrying the weight of old money and older power. "This is William Carter, Michael's father. I think it's time we had a conversation." Sarah's blood ran cold. Michael was already reaching for the phone, his expression darkening as he realized who was calling. "I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mr. Carter," Sarah replied carefully. "Oh, but we do. You see, your little relationship with my son is causing significant damage to our family business. Several major clients have expressed concerns about Michael's judgment, and the board is beginning to question his fitness as CEO." William's voice carried the certainty of a man accustomed to getting his way. "End this now, Miss Wilson, and I'll ensure you're compensated generously for your time. Continue, and I will personally destroy everything my son has worked for, everything he values, until he has no choice but to come crawling back." Michael grabbed the phone from her hands. "Dad." "What the hell, Michael?" William's voice carried absolute authority. "End this now, or I'll end it for you. The Thompson contract alone is worth $50 million, and Robert has made it clear that his continued partnership depends on you making the right choice. Choose wisely, son. Choose your future over this infatuation." The line went dead, leaving them both staring at the phone in stunned silence. "Michael," Sarah began, her heart sinking. "If your business is at risk, I don't give a damn about the business," Michael said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. "I won't let them manipulate me with threats." But even as he held her, Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about everything Michael had worked for, his entire legacy hanging in the balance. And for the first time since they'd begun this relationship, Sarah wondered if love would be enough to overcome the forces arrayed against them. The war for their future had officially begun. Chapter 5. The Leap of Faith. The storm had been brewing for 3 days, ever since photos of Michael and Sarah's intimate dinner at the jazz club appeared in the society pages with the headline, "Billionaire's Surprising Romance with Former Auction Girl." The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and barely veiled racism, painting Sarah as a gold-digging opportunist who had somehow ensnared one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Michael had been in meetings all morning, his jaw tight with barely controlled fury, as he fielded calls from board members, investors, and business partners. Sarah sat at her desk, trying to focus on work, while ignoring the whispers and stares from other employees who had clearly read the article. When Helen approached her desk with a grim expression, Sarah's stomach clenched with dread. "The board wants to see you," Helen said quietly. "Conference room A, now." Sarah's heart hammered as she walked through the halls, aware of every curious glance, every hushed conversation that stopped when she passed. The conference room held 8 of Carter Global's most powerful board members, their faces ranging from barely concealed hostility to cold indifference. "Miss Wilson," said Charles Harrison, the board chairman, his voice carrying the authority of old money and older prejudices, "please sit." Sarah remained standing, her chin lifted with the dignity her mother had taught her. "I prefer to stand, thank you." "Very well." Harrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'll be direct. Your relationship with Mr. Carter is causing significant damage to this company's reputation and business relationships. The Thompson Group has threatened to withdraw their $50 million contract unless certain adjustments are made to the leadership structure." "What kind of adjustments?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "Your immediate termination, for starters, and an end to whatever unprofessional relationship you've developed with Mr. Carter." The words hit her like physical blows, but Sarah kept her expression steady. "And if I refuse?" Harrison's laugh was cold. "My dear girl, you seem to misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. You're being terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "Like hell they will." Michael's voice cut through the room like a whip crack. He stood in the doorway, his face dark with fury, his presence commanding immediate attention. Every board member shifted uncomfortably as he entered the room, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "Michael," Harrison began placatingly, "we were just explaining to Miss Wilson. I heard what you were explaining." Michael moved to stand beside Sarah, his hand finding hers in a gesture of unmistakable solidarity. "And I'm here to tell you that if you fire her, you'll have my resignation within the hour." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Harrison's face went white. "Michael, surely you're not serious. This company is your legacy. Your life's work. This company is a business," Michael corrected coldly. "And businesses can be rebuilt. But finding someone like Sarah, someone real and good and brave enough to stand by me despite pressure from people like you, that's irreplaceable." "You're thinking with your hormones, not your head," snapped another board member. "This girl is obviously after your money." "Careful," Michael's voice went dangerously quiet. "You're talking about the woman I love, the woman I'm going to marry." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at Michael in shock. They had never discussed marriage, never even used the word love, though she felt it in every look, every touch between them. Harrison recovered first. "Michael, you can't be serious. The scandal alone would destroy everything your father built." "My father?" Michael's laugh was bitter. "Let me tell you something about my father. He's been calling in favors, pressuring clients, orchestrating this entire campaign to destroy the woman I love. And you know what? I'm done caring about his approval or yours." Michael turned to address the room, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Here's what's going to happen. Miss Wilson keeps her job with a substantial raise and a promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development. Anyone who has a problem with that can submit their resignation. And if the Thompson Group wants to withdraw their contract because they can't stomach doing business with a company that values merit over prejudice, then we'll find better partners." "Michael," Harrison's voice carried a note of desperation, "your father will cut you off completely. Your trust fund, your inheritance, your position as CEO. You'll lose everything." Michael's smile was brilliant and fierce. "Then I guess I'd better make sure I hold on to what really matters." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in her car outside Michael's building, her mind reeling from the afternoon's events. Michael had meant every word. She could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice, but the cost was staggering. By choosing her, he was risking everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Come up, please. We need to talk." She found him on his penthouse balcony, still in his business suit but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted but determined, and when he saw her, his entire face lit up. "There you are," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "I was afraid you'd run." "I thought about it," Sarah admitted against his chest. "Michael, what you did today, you could lose everything because of me. I could lose everything without you," he corrected, his hands stroking through her hair. "Sarah, I meant what I said in there. I love you. I'm in love with you, completely and utterly and irrevocably." The words made her heart soar and break at the same time. "I love you too. That's why I can't let you destroy your life for me." Michael pulled back to look at her, his eyes intense. "What if I told you that my life only started making sense when you walked into it, that everything before you was just going through the motions?" Before she could answer, the sky opened up with a downpour that had been threatening all day. They ran inside, both laughing as they were soaked to the skin within seconds. But as they stood in his living room, dripping and breathless, the laughter faded into something much more electric. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion, "there's something I need to ask you." To her shock, he dropped to one knee right there on his expensive carpet, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. The ring inside was breathtaking, not the massive diamond she might have expected, but a vintage sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds, elegant and timeless. "This was my grandmother's ring," Michael said, his voice shaking slightly. "The only member of my family who ever loved me for who I was, not what I represented. She always said that when I found the right woman, I'd know because she'd make me want to be better than I ever thought possible." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she looked at this powerful, wealthy man kneeling before her, offering her not just his ring, but his entire future. "Sarah Wilson," Michael continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "You are the most real, most beautiful, most courageous woman I've ever known. You've shown me what it means to love someone more than yourself, to choose connection over convenience. Will you marry me? Will you build something real and lasting with me, even if it means we have to start from nothing?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. The practical part of her mind screamed warnings about the scandal, the business repercussions, the way his family and social circle would make their lives miserable. But louder than all of that was her mother's voice. "Promise you'll live for love, not just survival." "Michael," she whispered, dropping to her knees in front of him, "are you sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. Your father, your family, your entire world is going to turn against us." "Let them," Michael said fiercely, taking her hands in his pearl. "Let them all turn against us. As long as I have you, I can face anything, even bankruptcy, even losing the company. Even that, Sarah, I'd rather be poor with you than rich without you. I'd rather face every challenge life throws at us together than live another day in that cold, empty world without you in it." The raw honesty in his voice broke down every last wall around her heart. This wasn't some fairy tale rescue. This was a man choosing love over everything else, just as she was choosing to believe in a future that seemed impossible but felt absolutely right. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." Michael's whoop of joy echoed through the apartment as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. When he kissed her, pouring all his love and relief and hope into the connection, Sarah felt the whole world shift around them. They made love that night with a desperate passion, as if they were trying to imprint themselves on each other's souls before the storm truly hit. Michael worshipped her body with his hands and mouth, whispering promises against her skin about their future together. When she moved above him, taking him deep inside her, they both cried out at the intensity of the connection, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual as well. "I love you," Michael gasped as they moved together in perfect rhythm. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too," Sarah replied, her hands framing his face as they climbed toward release together. "Always, no matter what comes, The next morning brought consequences swift and brutal. Michael's phone rang before dawn, his father calling to deliver an ultimatum that was as much promise as threat. "You have 24 hours to end this farce and fire that woman." William Carter's voice was ice cold. "Or I will personally ensure that you lose everything: the company, your trust fund, your place in this family. Emily Thompson has graciously agreed to take you back, and the board is prepared to overlook this temporary lapse in judgment if you make things right immediately." Michael looked at Sarah, still sleepy and beautiful in his shirt, her engagement ring catching the morning light, and felt his resolve harden into steel. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Dad. You see, I'm going to marry her. And if you can't accept that, then I guess we have nothing more to discuss." The silence that followed was so complete that Michael wondered if the call had dropped. Then William's voice came back, colder than winter. "So be it. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away for a piece of." Michael hung up before his father could finish the slur. Sarah was sitting up now, her face pale but determined. "How bad is it going to be?" she asked quietly. Michael pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "It's going to be hell," he said honestly. "But we'll face it together, and we'll come out stronger on the other side." As if to underscore his words, both their phones began buzzing with messages, calls, and notifications. The engagement announcement had somehow leaked to the press, and the media frenzy was just beginning. But as Michael held the woman he loved, feeling her strength and courage wrapped around him like armor, he knew they could survive anything. Love like theirs, real, honest, transformative love, was worth any price. Chapter 6. Wedding Bells and Battle Lines. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood before the mirror in the small bridal room of Mount Zion Baptist Church, adjusting the simple but elegant white dress that had been her mother's. Helen had worked miracles to have it altered perfectly, and Mrs. Lopez from her old apartment building had insisted on doing Sarah's hair and makeup, declaring that she deserved to look like a queen on her wedding day. "You look beautiful, honey," Helen said softly, tears glistening in her eyes as she fastened the pearl necklace that had been Michael's grandmother's. "Your mama would be so proud." Sarah touched the necklace gently, feeling the weight of history and love in the smooth pearls. In the weeks since their engagement, Michael's family had made good on their threats. William Carter had frozen Michael's trust fund, several board members had resigned in protest, and the society pages had been brutal in their coverage of the upcoming wedding. But through it all, Michael had remained steadfast, his love unwavering. "You ready?" asked Rachel Carter, Michael's younger sister, who had defied their father's fury to serve as Sarah's maid of honor. At 28, Rachel had her brother's kind eyes and their mother's gentle spirit, and she'd been the only member of Michael's family to welcome Sarah with genuine warmth. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Sarah replied, surprised by the steady strength in her own voice. The church was small but packed with love. Sarah's neighbors and friends from the diner filled the pews along with several colleagues from Carter Global who had chosen to support their boss, despite the controversy. Michael's few genuine friends sat alongside people from all walks of life, creating a congregation that would have horrified the society pages, but perfectly represented the love that had brought them all together. When the music began and Sarah walked down the aisle, she had eyes only for Michael. He stood at the altar in a classic black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away. Wonder, love, and absolute devotion written in every line of his features. When their eyes met, his smile was so brilliant it could have powered the entire church. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Johnson began, his warm voice carrying easily through the sanctuary, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Michael and Sarah, two souls who have found in each other not just love, but purpose." The ceremony was simple but profound, each word carrying weight and meaning. Pastor Johnson spoke of love as both gift and choice, while sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. When Michael recited his handwritten vows, his voice shook with emotion as he promised to love and cherish Sarah through whatever challenges lay ahead. "I promise to see you, really see you, every day for the rest of our lives," he declared, his hands steady as they held hers. "To choose you over comfort, over approval, over everything else this world offers." Sarah's own vows brought tears to half the congregation. "I promise to stand with you, not behind you or in front of you, but beside you, as we build something beautiful from love and hope and stubborn determination. You may kiss your bride, Pastor Johnson announced with a broad smile. Michael's hands framed Sarah's face as he leaned down to kiss her, pouring all his love and joy into the connection. The congregation erupted in cheers and applause, but all Sarah could hear was her own heartbeat, and Michael's whispered, "I love you." Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter. The name sent a thrill through her that had nothing to do with status or money and everything to do with belonging to the man who had chosen her above all else. The reception was held in the church fellowship hall, transformed by the community into something magical with string lights, homemade flowers, and enough food to feed an army. Michael had insisted on hiring a jazz band, the same group that had been playing the night they first danced at the club. And as their first song as husband and wife began, he pulled Sarah onto the small dance floor. "Any regrets?" he asked softly as they swayed together, her head resting on his shoulder. "Only that Mama isn't here to see this," Sarah replied honestly. "She would have loved you so much." "I wish I could have known her," Michael said, his arms tightening around her. "But I feel like I know her through you. Her strength, her love, her wisdom, it's all part of who you are." As the evening progressed, Sarah watched her new husband dance with Mrs. Lopez, listen intently to advice from her elderly neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, and laugh genuinely at stories shared by her friends from the diner. This was the Michael she'd fallen in love with, not the billionaire CEO, but the man who found joy in simple connections and authentic moments. "He's good for you," Rachel observed, joining Sarah at their table. "I've never seen my brother this happy. This real. Your father will never forgive him for choosing me," Sarah said quietly. "My father is a bitter, controlling man who's lost sight of what actually matters," Rachel replied firmly. "Michael has found something worth more than all of Dad's approval. He's found love. Real love. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that." Their honeymoon was a week in a private villa in the Caribbean, a wedding gift from one of Michael's few remaining business allies. The villa was paradise, perched on a cliff overlooking turquoise waters, with a private beach and enough seclusion to make them feel like the only two people in the world. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Sarah had dreamed, and more. Michael carried her across the threshold with tender ceremony, then spent hours exploring her body with reverent hands and whispered declarations of love. The ocean breeze billowed the white curtains around their bed as they came together with both passion and tenderness, celebrating their union with bodies and souls. "My wife," Michael breathed against her throat as they moved together in perfect harmony, his voice filled with wonder and fierce possession. "My beautiful, incredible wife." "My husband," Sarah gasped back, her fingers tangling in his hair as waves of sensation built between them. "I love you beyond reason, beyond fear, beyond everything." Their lovemaking throughout the week was a revelation, sometimes fierce with unleashed desire, as they made love in the infinity pool with the ocean stretching endlessly before them, sometimes gentle with reverence, as they joined together on the private beach under a canopy of stars. In the outdoor shower, surrounded by tropical flowers, with warm rain cascading over their entwined bodies, they discovered new depths of passion and intimacy. During the day, they talked about their future. Michael spoke of his plans to start his own company, something built on integrity rather than inherited wealth. Sarah shared her dream of finishing her education and maybe teaching, of finding a way to help other young women who found themselves in impossible situations. "We could start a foundation," Michael suggested as they floated together in the warm ocean, Sarah's legs wrapped around his waist. "Something focused on education and opportunity for underprivileged women." "With what money?" Sarah asked practically. "Your father has frozen your assets." "I have some investments he doesn't know about," Michael grinned. "And more importantly, I have something he never understood, the ability to build something from nothing if I have the right partner." His faith in their future was infectious, and for a week, Sarah allowed herself to believe that love really could conquer all. Reality came crashing back the moment they landed at the airport. Michael's phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls and urgent messages. By the time they reached his penthouse, his face was grim. "How bad?" Sarah asked, watching him scroll through the messages. "But," Michael admitted, "the board called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They're voting on my removal as CEO, citing conduct detrimental to company interests." and we've lost 3 major contracts while we were gone. The Thompson Group, Harrison Industries, and Stone Financial. Sarah sank onto the couch, the weight of reality settling on her shoulders like a stone. $50 million in contracts gone because of me. Gone because of prejudice and small-minded thinking. Michael corrected firmly, sitting beside her and taking her hands. Sarah, we knew this was going to happen. We prepared for it. Did we? Sarah pulled her hands free, standing to pace across the room. Michael, your entire life's work is being destroyed because you married me. How is that something we can just prepare for? Because my life's work isn't a company built on other people's money and approval, Michael said quietly. My life's work is building something meaningful with the woman I love. But even as he spoke, Sarah could see the strain in his eyes, the weight of losing everything he'd worked for. That night, as Michael slept fitfully beside her, she made a decision that broke her heart but felt necessary. The next morning, while Michael was at the board meeting that would likely end his career, Sarah sat in the sterile office of Bennett and Associates, one of the city's most respected divorce attorneys. Mrs. Carter, the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, reviewed the papers Sarah had requested. Are you certain about this? These are irrevocable divorce papers. Once signed and filed, there's no going back. I need to free him, Sarah said quietly, her wedding ring feeling like a weight on her finger. His entire life is being destroyed because of me. If I disappear, if I set him free, maybe he can salvage something. And you believe he'll thank you for this decision? Sarah's laugh was bitter. He'll hate me, but he'll be free to rebuild his life, to find someone appropriate for his world. The lawyer slid the papers across the desk. I'll need your signature on each page. But, Mrs. Carter, I have to ask, is this what you want, or what you think you should do? Before Sarah could answer, the office door burst open. Michael stood in the doorway, his face a mask of fury and hurt, his eyes locked on the divorce papers spread across the desk. What the hell is this? He demanded, his voice deadly quiet. The lawyer quickly excused herself, leaving them alone in the suddenly charged atmosphere of the office. Michael, Sarah began, standing on shaky legs, let me explain. Explain what? How you decided to destroy our marriage without bothering to discuss it with me first. How you decided that I was too weak to handle losing a company when losing you would destroy me completely. You don't understand, Sarah protested, tears streaming down her face. You've lost everything because of me. Your family, your business, your entire future. My future is with you, Michael shouted, his composure finally cracking. My future has always been with you. From the moment I saw you on that auction stage and knew I had to protect you. Protect me? Sarah's voice rose to match his. I don't need protecting, Michael. I need to protect you. Can't you see that everyone was right? I'm destroying your life. You're saving my life. Michael grabbed her shoulders, his eyes blazing. Before you, I was sleepwalking through an existence that meant nothing. You gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a reason to be better than I ever thought possible. And what do you have now? Sarah challenged. What do you have to show for choosing me? Michael's hands gentled on her shoulders, his voice dropping to a whisper. I have you. I have love. I have a future worth fighting for, instead of an inheritance worth inheriting. The raw honesty in his voice broke something loose in Sarah's chest. All her fears and insecurities came pouring out. Her terror that she wasn't good enough for his world, her guilt over the sacrifices he'd made, her bone-deep certainty that love wasn't enough to overcome the odds stacked against them. Michael listened to every word, then pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed out all the pain and fear she'd been carrying. Listen to me, he said fiercely when her tears finally subsided. I didn't marry you to save you, and I didn't marry you because I needed saving. I married you because you're the strongest, most beautiful, most real person I've ever known. And if you think I'm going to let you sacrifice our marriage to save my pride, you're seriously underestimating how stubborn I can be. The board fired you today, didn't they? Sarah asked quietly. Unanimously, Michael confirmed. Effective immediately. And you're okay with that? Michael's smile was brilliant. Baby, I've never been more free in my life. Now we can build something that's truly ours, something that no one can take away from us. As they stood in that sterile office, holding each other amid the wreckage of divorce papers that would never be signed, Sarah finally understood what her mother had meant about living for love instead of just survival. This was living messy, scary, uncertain, but absolutely real. Their war was far from over, but they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Chapter 7. Testing Times. 6 months after their wedding, the fairy tale had become a battlefield. Sarah stood in the kitchen of their downsized apartment, staring at the stack of overdue bills that seemed to multiply daily. The penthouse was gone, sold to pay off debts, when Michael's assets remained frozen. The expensive cars had been replaced by a reliable but modest sedan. The designer clothes had given way to practical outfits suitable for job interviews that led nowhere. Another rejection, Michael said quietly, entering the kitchen with his phone still in his hand. His hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, and exhaustion lined his face. Anderson Associates won't even see me for an interview. Apparently, I'm too controversial for their corporate culture. Sarah's heart clenched at the defeat in his voice. In 6 months, Michael had gone from being one of the city's most sought-after business leaders to a pariah that no respectable company would touch. The Whisper campaign orchestrated by his father and former associates had been devastatingly effective. "I'm going back to work," Sarah announced, lifting her chin with determination. "Absolutely not." Michael's response was immediate and firm. We agreed when we thought this would blow over in a few months," Sarah interrupted. "Michael, we can't pay rent next month. I'm not going to sit here and watch us lose everything while I could be contributing." "You are contributing. You're my wife, my partner. I'm a liability," Sarah said bluntly, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "Every rejection you get, every door that slams in your face, it's because of me. The least I can do is help us survive while you rebuild." Michael crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms despite her resistance. "Don't you dare blame yourself for other people's bigotry and small-mindedness. It doesn't matter whose fault it is," Sarah said against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent that had become her anchor in the storm. "What matters is survival. And right now, survival means I go back to work." Michael held her tighter, his voice rough with emotion. "I promised to take care of you. I promised you'd never have to. You promised to love me," Sarah corrected, pulling back to look at his face. "Everything else we'll figure out together. That's what partnerships are about, right? Both people pulling their weight." The pain in Michael's eyes was almost unbearable, but she saw the moment he accepted the inevitable. They had burned through their savings, and pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. Thompson's Diner felt like stepping back in time, but not in a comforting way. The grease-stained walls and worn vinyl booths that had once represented honest work now felt like a monument to everything she'd briefly escaped and lost again. Well, sneered Brenda, the head waitress who had always resented Sarah's dreams of something better. "Look who's come crawling back. Guess playing princess didn't work out so well, huh?" Sarah tied her apron with steady hands, refusing to rise to the bait. "I need the work, Brenda. Nothing more complicated than that." But it was more complicated. Much more so. Word of her return spread quickly through the interconnected network of Michael's former business world. By the end of her first week, she was fielding cruel comments from customers who recognized her from the society pages. "Isn't that the gold digger who destroyed Michael Carter?" She heard a woman whisper loudly to her companion at table 6. "I heard she was a prostitute before she trapped him into marriage." The lies and rumors followed her everywhere. Anonymous letters arrived at their apartment, filled with racial slurs and threats. Someone slashed the tires on their car. Their new neighbors, initially friendly, grew cold and distant as the gossip reached even their modest neighborhood. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation. It was watching what it did to Michael. Each cruel comment directed at Sarah landed like a physical blow on him. He started insisting on picking her up from work, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage as he witnessed the treatment she endured. "This has to stop," he said one night after a particularly brutal shift where a group of his former country club acquaintances had made a show of leaving without ordering after recognizing her. "I can't watch them destroy you like this." "They're not destroying me," Sarah said firmly. Though the constant hostility was wearing her down, "I'm stronger than they think. But you shouldn't have to be." Michael's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "This is my fault. All of it. No, Sarah said fiercely. This is their fault. The people who think love should be conditional on bank accounts and pedigrees. We didn't do anything wrong by falling in love. That night, they made love with desperate intensity, as if they could somehow shield each other from the world's cruelty through the connection of their bodies. Michael worshipped her with his hands and mouth, whispering apologies and promises against her skin, while she clung to him like an anchor in the storm of their circumstances. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Sarah stared at the plastic stick, her heart hammering with a mixture of joy and terror. A baby. She was carrying Michael's child, their child, conceived in love, but destined to be born into uncertainty and struggle. Sarah, Michael's voice called from the bedroom. Everything okay? She emerged from the bathroom with the test in her trembling hands, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Michael took one look at her face, then at the test, and his expression transformed from concern to wonder to fierce, protective joy. A baby, he whispered, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around their tiny living room. We're having a baby. For a moment, all their troubles fell away. There was only joy, pure and brilliant, at the life they had created together. Michael's hands were gentle as they settled on her still flat stomach, his eyes bright with tears. I love you, he said against her forehead. Both of you. So much. The next few weeks were among the happiest of their marriage. Despite their circumstances, Michael became almost comically protective, insisting she quit her job at the diner, bringing her prenatal vitamins and healthy meals, reading pregnancy books with the same intensity he'd once applied to business contracts. We're going to be okay, he promised one evening as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach, where the tiniest swell was just beginning to show. The 3 of us, we're going to build something beautiful together. Sarah had never loved him more than in those moments when he spoke about their future with such certainty, such hope. They talked about names, about nursery colors, about the kind of parents they wanted to be. For the first time in months, the future felt bright with possibility. The cramping started during her second trimester, mild at first, then increasingly severe. Michael rushed her to the emergency room at 2:00 a.m. on a snowy December night, his face white with fear as Sarah doubled over in pain. I'm sorry, the doctor said gently after the examination and ultrasound. There's no heartbeat. I'm afraid you've lost the pregnancy. The words hit them like a physical blow. Sarah felt something fundamental break inside her chest, a sound like crystal shattering that seemed to echo through her entire being. Michael's hand gripped hers so tightly it should have hurt, but she was beyond feeling anything but the yawning emptiness where hope used to live. The medical procedures that followed were a blur of clinical efficiency and hushed sympathy. They went home to their small apartment with empty arms and broken hearts. The tiny nursery they'd begun preparing was now a monument to dreams that would never be. Sarah retreated into herself, barely speaking, barely eating, moving through the days like a ghost. The grief was overwhelming, made worse by the guilt that whispered this was somehow her fault, that the stress and hostility she'd endured had cost them their child. It's not your fault, Michael said one night, finding her crying silently in the dark. The doctor said it happens sometimes, especially with first pregnancies. It's not your fault, baby. Isn't it? Sarah's voice was raw with pain. All the stress, all the anger, all the hatred directed at us every day, how could that not affect the baby? Michael pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since the hospital, she let herself be held. They cried together then, grieving not just for the child they'd lost, but for the innocence that had been stripped from their love by circumstances beyond their control. I can't do this anymore, Sarah whispered against his chest. I can't keep fighting. I'm so tired, Michael. I'm so tired of being strong. Then let me be strong for both of us, Michael replied, his voice fierce with determination. Let me carry us for a while. And he did. For the weeks that followed, Michael became her protector, her caretaker, her anchor. He held her when she cried, cooked for her when she couldn't face food, sat with her in comfortable silence when words felt too heavy to speak. Slowly, gradually, they began to heal together, not separately, carrying their grief like individual burdens, but together, sharing the weight of loss and the slow, tentative hope of recovery. We're going to make it, Michael said one evening as they sat together on their small couch. Sarah curled against his side while snow fell outside their window. "We're going to make it through this. How can you be so sure?" Sarah asked, her voice still fragile from weeks of tears. Michael's arms tightened around her. "Because losing our baby showed me something. It showed me that no matter what gets taken from U.S. money, status, approval, even Dreamsway still have each other. And as long as we have each other, we can survive anything." The miscarriage had tested their love in the cruelest way possible, but instead of breaking them apart, it had forged them into something stronger. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, most broken, and loved each other through it. "I want to try again," Sarah said quietly. "Not now, not yet, but someday. I want us to have a family." "We will," Michael promised, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "When we're ready, when we're stronger, we'll try again, and next time we'll be ready for whatever comes." As winter gave way to spring, Michael and Sarah emerged from their grief changed, but not defeated. They had been tested by circumstances that would have broken many couples, but their love had proven stronger than loss, deeper than despair. The worst was behind them now. It was time to start fighting back together. Chapter 8. Finding Strength. Spring brought more than just warmer weather. It brought a renewed sense of purpose that neither Michael nor Sarah had felt in months. They sat at their small kitchen table on a sunny April morning, laptops open between them, surrounded by legal documents, business plans, and the kind of determined energy that comes from deciding to stop being victims of circumstance. "Legacy Solutions," Sarah said, testing the name they'd chosen for their new company. "I still love how it sounds. It represents everything we want to build, honoring where we came from while creating something new." Michael looked up from the incorporation papers he was reviewing, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's perfect, just like our business model. Helping companies build authentic connections with diverse communities while maintaining their core values." The past month had been a whirlwind of planning, research, and careful strategizing. Using Michael's remaining personal savings and a small business loan Sarah had qualified for based on her work history, they were launching their own consulting firm. The concept was revolutionary in their conservative business circles. Instead of helping companies maintain exclusive, homogeneous customer bases, Legacy Solutions would specialize in authentic diversity and community outreach. "Mrs. Lopez said 3 of her church friends want to meet with us about their small businesses," Sarah reported, scrolling through her emails. "And Pastor Jones thinks we should present our services to the Community Development Council." "Brilliant," Michael said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You have connections and insights that traditional consultants completely miss. We're not just offering services, we're building bridges." The touch of his hand sent familiar warmth through Sarah's system. Even after everything they'd been through, the simple contact could still make her pulse quicken. Michael's thumb traced over her wedding ring as he spoke, a gesture that had become unconscious but never lost its meaning. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that still occasionally surfaced. Starting from scratch, building something completely new, it's a huge risk. Michael brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. "The biggest risk would be giving up on ourselves. We've proven we can survive the worst: losing our baby, financial ruin, social ostracism. Starting a business together? That's just the next adventure." His confidence was infectious, and Sarah felt her doubts melting away. This was what she loved most about Michael: his ability to see possibility where others saw only problems, his unwavering belief in their partnership. Their first official meeting was with Martinez Brothers Construction, a family-owned company that had been struggling to secure contracts with larger developers. Elena Martinez, the daughter who'd recently taken over the business, welcomed them into her modest office with the kind of warmth Sarah remembered from her own community. "We're good," Elena explained, gesturing to photos of their work on the walls. "Really good. But the big firms don't want to take chances on us. They see our name, our location, and they make assumptions." Michael leaned forward, his business instincts engaged. "What if we could help you showcase your work in a way that highlights your advantages rather than apologizes for your differences?" For the next 2 hours, Sarah watched Michael in action, and it was like watching a master artist at work. He asked probing questions, listened intently to answers, and gradually built a comprehensive understanding of Martinez brothers' challenges and strengths. But what impressed her most was how he incorporated her insights seamlessly into the conversation. "Sarah makes an excellent point about authenticity in marketing," Michael said, when she suggested emphasizing the company's community roots rather than trying to mimic corporate competitors. "Your family history, your neighborhood connections, your understanding of local needs, those aren't obstacles to overcome. They're competitive advantages to leverage." By the end of the meeting, they had their first client and a plan that excited everyone involved. As they walked to their car, Sarah felt a pride she'd never experienced in any previous job. "We're actually good at this," she marveled, sliding into the passenger seat of their modest sedan. "We're better than good," Michael replied, his smile brilliant as he started the engine. "We're revolutionary. Do you realize what we just did in there? We completely reframed how that family thinks about their business identity." That night, they celebrated their first client with takeout Chinese food and champagne, an odd combination that somehow perfectly represented their new life of mixed circumstances and unlimited hope. They made love on their living room floor afterward, too excited and passionate to make it to the bedroom, Michael whispering against her skin about the future they were building together. "I love you like this," Sarah gasped, as Michael moved inside her with slow, deliberate intensity, confident and excited and absolutely brilliant. "I love you like this too," Michael replied, his voice rough with desire, fearless and visionary, and so incredibly sexy when you're changing the world. Their lovemaking that night had an edge of triumph to it, a celebration of shared success and renewed purpose that left them both breathless and deeply connected. Over the following months, Legacy Solutions grew from a kitchen table dream to a legitimate business with a growing reputation. Their approach was unconventional but effective. Instead of cold calling Fortune 500 companies, they started with smaller, community-based businesses and let their success speak for itself. Word traveled fast in interconnected business networks. When Martinez brothers landed a major municipal contract after implementing Legacy's community-focused marketing strategy, other companies began to take notice. When a small tech startup saw its user base triple after Legacy helped them authentically engage with diverse communities, the local business press picked up the story. Carter Consulting. Success story from corporate pariah to community champion. Read the headline in the Business Journal's feature article about their company's meteoric rise. "How does it feel to be a success story?" Sarah asked Michael as they sat in their first real office, a modest but professional space in a diverse business district they'd chosen specifically for its community connections. "It feels like vindication," Michael admitted, looking around the office they'd furnished with a mix of practical pieces and artwork from local artists. "Not just for us, but for everyone who said authentic diversity was more than just a buzzword." Sarah had grown into her role as VP of Strategic Development with natural grace, discovering leadership abilities she'd never known she possessed. She spoke at community meetings, presented to potential clients, and developed marketing strategies that consistently outperformed traditional approaches. But she never forgot her roots, maintaining connections with her old neighborhood and using those relationships to bridge gaps between communities. "Mrs. Jenkins called," she told Michael one afternoon, referring to a client whose restaurant had become a neighborhood institution after implementing their community engagement plan. "She wants to recommend us to her sister's catering business in Detroit." "Expansion," Michael mused, his eyes lighting up with possibility. "Are we ready for that? Are we ever really ready for anything?" Sarah countered with a smile. "But that's never stopped us before." Their success was built on more than just business acumen. It was built on genuine partnership. Michael brought sophisticated strategic thinking and industry connections, while Sarah contributed community insights and authentic relationship-building skills. But their greatest strength was how they complemented each other, each making the other better and stronger. The knock on their office door came on a warm September afternoon. Sarah looked up from her computer to see Rachel Carter standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Rachel," Sarah rose immediately, embracing Michael's sister warmly. "What brings you here? Is everything okay?" "Everything's wonderful, actually," Rachel replied, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I came to apologize to both of you." Michael emerged from his inner office, his face shifting from surprise to caution at the sight of his sister. The rift with his family remained a source of pain despite his success in building a new life. "I should have stood up for you from the beginning," Rachel continued, her voice gaining strength. "I should have told Dad he was wrong, told Mother she was being cruel, told everyone who would listen that what you two have is beautiful and real and worth celebrating." "Rachel," Michael began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Let me finish. I've watched you two build something incredible together, not just this business, though it's amazing, but the way you support each other, the way you've created a life based on love and mutual respect. It's everything I want for myself someday." Sarah felt tears starting in her own eyes. "You don't need to apologize." "Yes, I do. I let fear of Dad's disapproval make me a coward when I should have been celebrating my brother's happiness." Rachel turned to Michael, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm so proud of you, of both of you. You've shown me what real courage looks like." The three of them stood in the middle of their modest office, hugging and crying and finally healing some of the wounds that had been festering for over a year. When Rachel finally pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "I have news," she announced. "I'm getting married." "Rachel!" Sarah squealed immediately, demanding to see the ring and hear about the fiancé. "Mark's wonderful," Rachel said, her face glowing with happiness. "He's a teacher, completely unimpressive by Dad's standards, but he makes me laugh, and he thinks I'm amazing, exactly as I am." "When's the wedding?" Michael asked, his smile brilliant. 6 months. "And I want you both there, as my family, my real family." Later that evening, as Michael and Sarah walked home from their office through the diverse, vibrant neighborhood they'd come to love, they reflected on how far they'd traveled from that desperate night at the auction house. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked, squeezing Michael's hand as they passed the small park where local children played while their parents chatted on benches. "The penthouse, the luxury, the easy life." Michael stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands framing her face in the gesture that still made her heart skip. "I miss exactly none of it. This life we've built, together, our business, our neighborhood, our authentic relationships, this is what I was searching for without even knowing it, even when we're eating ramen noodles for dinner because we reinvested all our profits back into the company." "Especially then," Michael laughed, leaning down to kiss her softly, "because those ramen noodles represent something we built together, something no one can take away from us." As they kissed under the streetlight, surrounded by the sounds of their adopted community children playing, neighbors chatting, music drifting from open windows, Sarah felt a contentment deeper than any luxury could provide. They had lost everything and found something infinitely more valuable, a partnership built on love, respect, and shared purpose. Legacy Solutions was thriving. Their marriage was stronger than ever, and they were finally building the life they dreamed of on their own terms. Michael had learned that his worth wasn't measured by his father's approval or his bank account balance, while Sarah had discovered leadership abilities she'd never imagined possessing. They had faced the worst and emerged not just intact, but triumphant. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them as they had learned to meet everything else, together, with love as their foundation and each other as their strength. The future had never looked brighter. Chapter 9. Shadows of the Past. The call came at 3:00 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change everything. Michael rolled over to answer his phone, instantly alert despite the early hour. Late-night calls in their world usually meant either business emergencies or family crises. Sarah stirred beside him, her hand instinctively moving to rest on the gentle swell of her belly, where their second child was growing, now safely into the second trimester. "Michael." The voice was barely a whisper, but Michael recognized it immediately. His grandfather, Thomas Carter, the family patriarch who'd been slowly dying of cancer for the past 6 months. "Grandpa Thomas." Michael sat up, concern flooding his voice. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm dying, boy. Tonight, probably. But before I go," the old man's voice was weak but determined, "I need to see you now. There are terrible things I need to tell you before it's too late." Michael was already reaching for his clothes. "I'll be right there." "Alone, Michael. Come alone. What I have to say, it's going to change everything." The Carter family estate loomed against the pre-dawn darkness like something from a Gothic novel, all shadows and sharp angles. Michael hadn't been here since his wedding day over 2 years ago, and the memories of his childhood in these halls felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. He found his grandfather in the master bedroom, propped up in the massive four-poster bed that had belonged to Carter patriarchs for generations. Thomas looked impossibly frail, his once commanding presence reduced to paper-thin skin and eyes that burned with desperate urgency. "Sit," Thomas commanded, gesturing to the chair beside the bed. "And prepare yourself, boy. What I'm about to tell you is going to shatter everything you think you know about this family." Michael settled into the chair, his heart already racing with apprehension. "Grandpa, maybe this should wait until there is no waiting." Thomas's grip on Michael's hand was surprisingly strong. "Your father is on his way here. He's been trying to keep me from talking to you, but I won't die with these secrets." The old man's breathing was labored, but his voice gained strength as he began to speak. "Michael, you are not William's biological son." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He stared at his grandfather in stunned silence, the room seeming to tilt around him. "What?" he managed to whisper. Thomas's grip on Michael's hand tightened. "Your mother, my beautiful spirited daughter-in-law, had an affair in the early years of her marriage. William was cold, controlling, more interested in business than his young wife." Michael's mind reeled, rejecting what he was hearing. "That's impossible. I look like him." "You look like her," Thomas corrected gently, studying Michael's face with sad eyes. "You have her spirit, her capacity for genuine love. But your real father—" He paused, gathering strength. "Your real father was a man named John Wilson." The name exploded through Michael's consciousness. Wilson Sarah's maiden name. John Wilson was a brilliant civil rights lawyer, a leader who was fighting for integration and equality in the 1960s. Thomas's voice grew stronger as he continued the story. "Your mother met him at a charity function, one of the few integrated events of that era. They fell in love, Michael, really truly desperately fell in love." Michael felt the world shifting beneath him. "What happened to him?" Tears leaked from Thomas's eyes. "He was murdered, shot down in the street by men who couldn't stand the idea of a black man with that much power and influence. Your mother was 3 months pregnant when it happened." The room seemed to spin around Michael. Everything he thought he knew about his identity, his history, his very DNA was crumbling. "Does William know?" "William has always known. He chose to raise you as his own, but he's held this secret over your mother's head your entire life. It's why she was so cold, so distant. She was broken by grief and trapped by shame." "And John Wilson," Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "Did he have family? A daughter? A little girl who would be, around my wife's age now?" Thomas's eyes met Michael's rilled. "Michael, I believe Sarah is your biological father's granddaughter. You and she share a connection deeper than love. You share blood, history, a legacy of fighting for what's right against impossible odds." The revelation hit Michael like a tidal wave. Sarah wasn't just his wife, his partner, his soulmate. She was his family in ways neither of them had ever imagined. Their grandfathers had been fighting the same battles, one in boardrooms and courtrooms, one in the streets and communities. "Why are you telling me this now?" Michael asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Because William is planning something terrible. He's been working with Emily Thompson and others to destroy you completely. They're going to frame you for embezzlement, claim you've been stealing from Legacy Solutions clients. The evidence is all fabricated, but it's convincing." Michael's blood ran cold. "When? Soon? Maybe today. William thinks if he can disgrace you publicly, put you in prison, Sarah will leave, and you'll come crawling back to the family, desperate enough to accept any terms he sets." Before Michael could respond, they heard footsteps in the hall, heavy, familiar, filled with barely controlled fury. "He knows I'm here," Thomas whispered urgently. "Michael, there's a safety deposit box at First National Bank, box 1247. The key is taped under my desk drawer. Everything is in their documents, photos, proof of your real parentage, and William's crimes over the years. Take it all. Use it to protect yourself and that beautiful wife of yours." The bedroom door burst open, and William Carter strode in, his face a mask of rage. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saying goodbye to my grandfather," Michael replied calmly, though his heart was hammering, "and learning some very interesting family history." William's eyes flicked between Michael and Thomas, understanding passing between them. "You told him?" "I told him the truth," Thomas said with the last of his strength. "Something you should have done years ago." "The truth? William's laugh was bitter. The truth is that you're a bastard, Michael, the son of a dead troublemaker who got exactly what he deserved. But I raised you anyway, gave you my name, my legacy, your hatred, Michael corrected, standing slowly, your prejudice, your need to control everything and everyone around you. And look where defying me has gotten you. William sneered. Married to a waitress, running a second-rate business, living in a middle-class neighborhood like common people. Happy, Michael said simply. It's gotten me happy. William's face contorted with fury. Enjoy it while it lasts. By tomorrow, you'll be in jail. Your precious wife will realize what a mistake she made, and you'll come begging for my help. Michael looked at his grandfather one last time, seeing understanding and approval in the dying man's eyes. Goodbye, Grandpa Thomas. Thank you for finally telling me the truth. As Michael left the estate, he felt simultaneously liberated and terrified. The truth about his parentage explained so much. His natural empathy, his ability to connect with people from all backgrounds, his immediate and profound attraction to Sarah that night at the auction. They had been drawn together by more than love. They had been drawn together by destiny. But William's threats weren't idle. As Michael drove home through the early morning light, he could feel the net closing around him. The arrest came with devastating precision, orchestrated for maximum humiliation. Michael was in their office reviewing contracts with Sarah for their biggest deal yet when the FBI agents burst through the door with a thunderous crash. Michael Carter, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The words echoed through the office like gunshots. Sarah's face drained of color as armed agents swarmed their workspace, their movements efficient and ruthless. Outside, news vans were already positioned, cameras rolling as Michael was led away in handcuffs. This is insane, Sarah protested, her voice strong despite her obvious shock, stepping forward as they cuffed her husband. My husband hasn't embezzled anything. Legacy Solutions books are completely transparent. Ma'am, step back immediately, the lead agent commanded, his hand moving to his weapon. We have federal warrants to search these premises and seize all financial records, computers, and documents. As they roughly guided Michael toward the door, reporters surged forward with shouted questions. Mr. Carter, did you steal from your clients? Is it true your wife was prostituting? How long have you been running this scam? Michael caught Sarah's eyes as they led him away. Call Rachel, he said urgently. Tell her to get the key from Thomas's desk. Safety deposit box 1247 at First National. Everything we need is there. I don't understand. Trust me, Michael said as they pushed him toward the door. I love you, both of you. Remember that. No matter what you hear, the media circus was immediate and brutal. By evening, every news channel was running the story. Legacy Solutions CEO arrested for fraud. Worse was the character assassination that followed. Anonymous sources, clearly coordinated by William and Emily, painted Michael as a con artist who had been stealing from clients to fund his lifestyle, and Sarah as a gold digger who had trapped him with strategic pregnancies. The stress of the arrest, the media attention, and the fear for their future took a devastating toll on Sarah's body. 3 days after Michael's arrest, as she sat in their apartment trying to coordinate his legal defense while fielding calls from reporters and angry clients, the cramping began. No, she whispered, doubling over as pain shot through her abdomen. Not again. But her body wasn't listening to her pleas. By the time Rachel arrived to drive her to the hospital, Sarah was in full premature labor at just 28 weeks, her body giving up under the crushing weight of stress and fear. We need to get your father, the doctor said as they rushed her into the delivery room. He should be here for this. He's in jail, Rachel said grimly, holding Sarah's hand as another contraction hit, falsely accused and locked up while his wife delivers their baby alone. The labor was fast and frightening. Their son, because it was a boy, just as they'd hoped, was born weighing barely 3 pounds. His tiny body was immediately whisked away to the NICU, where machines beeped frantically around him. Is he going to be okay? Sarah asked weakly, her body exhausted from the ordeal. He's a fighter, the doctor assured her. Small, but strong. Just like his parents, I'd guess. As Sarah lay in the hospital bed, her newborn son fighting for life in an incubator while her husband sat in a jail cell, she felt the weight of everything they'd endured crushing down on her. The auction house, The family rejection, the financial ruin, their miscarriage. And now the child born into a world where his father was branded a criminal and his future was uncertain. But even in the darkest moment of her life, surrounded by the beeping of medical machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, Sarah felt something unbreakable inside her core. Love, not just for Michael, not just for their tiny son, but for the truth that would set them free. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer her mother had taught her. Give us strength for the battle ahead. Let love be our victory. The war for their family's future was about to begin. And this time, they were fighting not just for themselves, but for their son's legacy. Whatever it took, however long it took, Sarah would prove Michael's innocence and expose the real criminals who had orchestrated their downfall. The Carter family's web of lies and prejudice was about to be torn apart, and the truth all of it would finally see the light of day. Chapter 10. Love's Ultimate Triumph. From his jail cell, Michael could hear the chaos outside, reporters shouting questions, protesters demanding justice. But none of that mattered compared to Rachel's smuggled message. Baby born. Tiny but fighting. Sarah's strong. Found the key, getting evidence. His son, his and Sarah's boy, was fighting for life while Michael sat helpless behind bars. The fury that filled him transcended every other concern, a primal need to protect his family. Carter, the guard called. Your lawyer's here. James Lee entered with Rachel, her face grim but determined. We got into the safety deposit box, she said, pulling out a thick envelope. Michael, you need to see this. Thomas Carter's secret cache was explosive. Bank records showing William's decades of embezzlement, photographs of Michael's mother with John Wilson, their love obvious in every frame, a birth certificate as a DNA test, and, most damning, recorded conversations where William admitted orchestrating John Wilson's murder. This isn't just evidence of your innocence, Lee said, his voice low with awe. This is evidence of multiple felonies spanning 40 years. He killed my father, Michael said quietly, my biological father, and he's been stealing from the company for decades. We take this to the FBI immediately, Lee decided. William Carter is about to discover what a real scandal looks like. The truth exploded across every news channel within hours. The same reporters who had covered Michael's arrest now had a bigger story. Carter Patriarch, exposed as murderer, embezzler, and master manipulator. William's reputation crumbled overnight. Business partners fled. Federal investigators began unraveling decades of crimes. And Emily Thompson was arrested as an accessory, but Michael barely noticed any of it from his hospital chair beside his son's incubator. Released from jail, he'd rushed straight to the NICU, where tiny Thomas John Carter, named for both grandfathers, lay fighting for his life. He's beautiful, Michael whispered, touching the incubator's glass. He looks like you. Sarah, still weak but radiant with relief, leaned against his shoulder. He has your stubbornness. The doctors say he's exceeding expectations. Of course he is, Michael replied with fierce pride. Fighting impossible odds is in his DNA. Justice came swiftly and completely. William received 20 years for embezzlement, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. Emily got 5 years for fraud. The Carter Global Board offered Michael his old position with full restoration of his inheritance. Michael's response was immediate. No, thank you. Instead, they poured themselves into legacy solutions. The publicity had made them famous for the right reasons, a couple whose love had exposed corruption and fought for justice. Companies nationwide sought their authentic approach to diversity. Little Thomas grew stronger each day. When he finally came home 3 months later, healthy and perfect, it felt like victory's final piece falling into place. Legacy Solutions became a national firm. They bought a beautiful home in their diverse neighborhood, never forgetting their roots. Their love deepened with each challenge faced together, each success shared, each quiet moment of happiness created. 5 years later, Daddy, catch me. Thomas John Carter launched himself from the backyard swing into Michael's waiting arms, his laughter bright as sunshine. The birthday party was in full swing, neighborhood children running through sprinklers, adults chatting over barbecue, jazz music drifting through the warm air. Happy birthday, buddy, Michael said, spinning his son around. At 5, Thomas was tall, with Michael's intense eyes and Sarah's warm smile, plus a spirit entirely his own. "He's getting so big," Sarah observed, appearing with lemonade, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, their daughter due in 3 months. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked, his arms circling her waist. "Perfect," Sarah replied, meaning it completely. Blessed beyond measure. The party represented everything they'd fought for. Friends from every background mingling freely, Thomas surrounded by love but not spoiled, the kind of community celebration that sustained families through generations. Elizabeth Carter sat in the shade, playing with her grandson while chatting with Mrs. Lopez. Michael's mother had appeared 6 months ago, freed from decades of fear by William's exposure. Her genuine desire to change had slowly earned their trust. Rachel and Mark were there with their own children, their marriage proof that choosing love over family expectations worked. Even former Carter Global colleagues attended, drawn by friendship, not obligation. "Uncle Michael," called Elena Martinez's daughter, cake frosting on her face. "Thomas says you're going to tell us about Grandpa John." After cake, Michael promised, and only if parents approve. John Wilson's story had become Legacy Solutions' cornerstone, not just the tragedy of his death, but the triumph of his legacy through his granddaughter. They'd established the John Wilson Foundation, providing scholarships to underserved youth. As children gathered for story time, Michael looked out at the assembled crowd. Children of every background, parents who'd found community despite differences, elderly neighbors who remembered when such gatherings would have been impossible. "Once upon a time," Michael began, his voice carrying across the yard, "there was a brave man who believed love was stronger than hate, that justice was worth fighting for even when the fight seemed impossible." As he told their story really, John's story, spanning generations, Michael felt Sarah's hand slip into his, their fingers intertwined, wedding rings catching afternoon sunlight, symbols of love that had conquered every obstacle. Later, after guests had gone and Thomas was tucked in with stories and kisses, Michael and Sarah sat on their porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Any regrets?" Michael asked. "Their private ritual over the years." "Only that it took so long to get here," Sarah replied, settling against his side. "But maybe we needed those trials to appreciate what we have. We've come far from that auction house." "The best journey of my life," she said softly. "Even the painful parts, because they led to this." Their daughter kicked against Michael's palm on her belly, as if agreeing. They'd decided to name her Hope Margaret Carter, after the emotion that sustained them and the mother whose love had shaped Sarah. "I love you," Michael said, the words as powerful as that first night when he'd held her through grief. "I love our family, our life, everything we've built together." "I love you too," Sarah replied, turning for a soft kiss. "My husband, my partner, my heart." In comfortable silence, surrounded by their neighborhood settling into evening, both knew they'd achieved something remarkable, no just success or security, but a love that had survived every test and created a legacy for generations. Their grandfathers had fought for justice in their time. Michael and Sarah had fought for love in theirs. Their children would carry both traditions forward, building on foundations of courage and unwavering devotion to what was right. Jazz music drifted from a neighbor's window, the same kind playing when they'd first danced. Michael stood, offering Sarah his hand despite her pregnancy. "Dance with me?" he asked, just as he had that first magical evening. "Always," she replied, stepping into his arms as naturally as breathing. They danced slowly under the stars, two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from others' hatred. Their love story was complete, but their love itself was infinite, growing stronger each day, each challenge, each moment of joy they created together. Under the vast night sky, surrounded by the sounds of their chosen community, Michael and Sarah danced as they had learned to live together, with love as their foundation and each other as their strength. It was, by any measure, the perfect ending to an extraordinary love story.